Let's talk about the Grand National, of course. It took place, about 2 hours ago? I Am Maximus, as Aaron just said, romped home to win. But one thing that's really miffed me this week is the protests and the objection to the race even taking place at all. Lots of animal rights protesters saying that it's very cruel. Well, what happened today, guys? No deaths in the Grand National itself. So they've made efforts in recent years to make the race safer for horses. They've reduced the size of the fences. They've changed the material in the fences. And, of course, today there was fewer runners as well. It seems to have worked. And my only problem is, despite that, despite no horses dying today, we're still getting all the lefty, woke animal rights protesters saying that we need to cancel the race. I think, guys, Darren, don't you agree with me, that in the same theme and vibe as the attacks on the royal family, it's just another way of trying to erode British culture, get rid of everything that's original and great about the country by people who, frankly, hate the country. Well,
yes, we're looking at one now. But look, I think this is all a total nonsense. It comes around every single year, right? It's as predictable as people saying St George wasn't English, right? Well, and we'll get on to more of that later. No, he was.
Wasn't he Turkish?
They say, oh, that's what they always say, yeah. And I find this whole thing absolutely preposterous, and I just think it's another sign of people seeking to destroy and denigrate things that are really quite important to us. And actually, I think there's nothing more British than the scenes we saw yesterday, where everyone was clearly absolutely mortal drunk and going for each other. What could be more British?
The fights. You mean the fights outside? I mean, come
Great
on.
British brawl.
Is that what Britishness is about? Fighting outside of a horse race? You know,
I don't think it was outside. I think that was
whatever.
Inside.
Yeah. Massive brawls. You know, drunk people everywhere. You know, I think of Britain as being better than that, and I think these animal rights activists think of Britain as being better than a country which tolerates animal cruelty. Now, I personally, I don't particularly care about the horse racing. I think, you know, it's quite fun to watch. I've been to Ascot. I quite enjoy it. But there's nothing anti-British about people who want better animal rights, is there? We all love our pets.
Do you know,
we all love our
these
dogs.
horses are
we all love
like
our
kings
horses.
and queens.
Those things are not incompatible. I mean, nobody loves horses more than horse owners and horse riders and those who are involved in the races.
Yeah.
They do live like kings. I mean, these horses are fed on a diet that most human beings would envy in terms of how sort of they are supercars. They are athletes at the top of their game. And anybody who has worked with horses or ridden horses knows that they love to run. They love to run and they love to jump. It's anti-British because the Grand National is an institution.
Yes.
And one of my most cherished memories of my granda Alf was that he used to lean forward in his armchair and ride the invisible horse because he was that into the Grand National. It's important that we keep these traditions going. I actually think it's the same with fox hunting because we've seen attacks similarly on fox hunting, even though the fox killing part has been removed. It's now trail hunting. Now we've seen the Grand National has been made much safer. The horses are much less likely to suffer injuries. And actually, do we want to be the sort of country that doesn't take risks? I mean, all sports incur risks. The jockeys are at risk as much as the horses are. And it's the same, like I say, with fox hunting, where that risk or that the original objection has been eliminated, but they just won't stop because what they want to do is attack British culture. It's not about animal rights.
Leo, I remember that Benjamin Butterworth, on one of his many fossil fuel-induced holidays, you were on a horse. Was that animal cruelty?
No, I don't.
Throughout the desert, it must have been gasping for a drink.
What do you think I was? I was in the Middle East.
Yes, I didn't mean with Benjamin's wig.
You call him Benjamin Fat?
No, my fact of being in the desert, I meant.
We're 11 minutes into the show and you've called me fat already. Look, it's good to see you for Grand National Day wearing a very fancy shirt with a horse logo on it. Your working class credentials continue to shine through.
Doesn't know the difference between the Grand National and polo.
No.
I love horse riding when I'm on holiday. It's not something that I've really done at home. In fact, as a kid, I was terrified of horses. And I do have friends who have criticised me for riding horses on holiday.
Really?
Yeah, but of course I'm doing it in an extremely...
Imagine being friends with people like that.
I'm doing it in an extremely casual way. I'm sure it's of no harm to the horses. And I have to say, when I was riding in Petra in Jordan, the horses looked very healthy and I wouldn't have got on them if they didn't.
The horse was called Petra?
No, the area is called Petra.
Oh.
But I do think that is very different. That kind of casual horse riding, which is perfectly healthy, I think, is quite different to something like the Grand National. You know, the argument that because it's British, so who cares if these animals are severely hurt and sometimes killed. Well, by that logic, why don't we throw kids in the
This
workhouse?
is total nonsense. These horses are looked after better than any horse in Petra or wherever.
You were in some, I forget, was it Yemen? Jordan. Do you really think that the horses in Jordan are treated better than the horses at the Grand National?
I think you're verging on racism there.
I do not.
You're talking about the difference between horses
in the desert.
You're talking about horses that are used by tourists versus horses that are pro athletes. Of course, they're taken better.
But this isn't the question. The question is the way those horses are used, and we know that year after year, there are horses that die at the Grand National and other races like it.
They've made it safer.
Today is an exception, a very unusual occasion where they didn't die. Any sport that kills off the people competing is not acceptable. If you were getting the 100 metres and every few years, you know, some Kenyan runner dropped dead, I think we'd say, we probably shouldn't have those races.
Let me tell you something, as someone who knows a lot about sport, more than you, by the way, Formula 1 drivers have died across the years in the name of the sport.
Yeah.
Horses die in the name of the sport they love. People running marathons have died doing the sport they love. Life comes with risk.
But
the horse doesn't have any choice over that.
Yes, they do.
That's the point.
Yes, they do.
Lewis Hamilton chooses to get into a racing
So do
car.
horses.
If a horse doesn't want to run, it won't run.
What did the horse say?
Hang on.
What did the horse say?
Ben Leo, so you're telling me at Aintree, they go up to the horses and they say, all right, Charlie, would you like to race today?
Albert, you clearly,
and the horse responds and says, yes, I'd love to, thank you.
You clearly know very little about horses.
Is that what happened?
After the show, Google a horse called, Mad Moose, a great character. Over the years...
Did he talk?
Mad Moose, that's what I call you.
He became famous for digging his heels in at the start of races, the flag would go down, or they moved him to flat racing in the end. He'd come out the gates and he'd refuse to race because he didn't want to do it. Horses aren't stupid. They love racing, they're bred to race, they're thoroughbreds, and frankly, if it wasn't for racing, they wouldn't be here in the first place. And actually, they've got more chance of dying in their field or their paddock, like one of my favourite horses of all time did. He was running around his paddock, Coulter Star, a very great horse. A lot of the viewers will probably know who he is. He died doing what he did at home in his field, jumping
You
fences.
think it's acceptable to kill animals so you can have a couple of beers and cheer along at the side?
This is nonsense.
That is what you're saying.
I'm sorry, but I'm a horsey girl. I love horses. I've ridden for most of my life, and I just think the way that you're talking about this will be so nonsensical to the ears of anybody who has known and worked with horses.
So you think the horses should die for the sake of a race that generates a bit of money and an excuse to have a couple of
This is nonsense hyperbole. You're making a straw man out of nothing.
It's not nonsense hyperbole. They die routinely in these races.
They have made changes to the Grand National to make it safer for the horses and riders.
But hang on.
I am in favour, as a horse lover, I am in favour, if you let me finish my point, I am in favour of animal rights. I am in favour of animal welfare and taking measures to make things safer for the animals. Of course I am. I love horses. I love animals. But the idea that simply taking part in the sport, steeplechasing, fox hunting, the Grand National, show jumping, the idea that is animal cruelty is nonsense, Benjamin. It's nonsense.
You say that it's OK because none died today. But, of course, you supported this when several died each year in the Grand National, didn't you?
Have you got that on record, Benjamin?
Let me tell you something.
I support them making it safer. But yes, I'm in support of the Grand National in general, yes.
Those races where they killed the horses and yet in the same breath you claim to care about animal rights.
That's nonsense because I've never commented on the Grand National before.
Well, I just asked you.
And now we're talking about it and they have made it safer for the horses and I think that's a good thing. No horses died this year. There is no reason why these sports are inherently
at the first hurdle, Emma.
anti-animal.
All right, stop horsing about.